I often wonder how different my life would have been if my parents hadn't divorced when I was 8. Back then, I was just Megan Carter, an ordinary kid living with both parents in a snug little house they'd worked hard to buy. Those early years are a blur of warmth and happiness, family dinners, Sunday outings to the park, and bedtime stories read by both Mom and Dad. Everything unraveled when they split up. Dad moved out but left us the house. He made sure we were fine financially, paying enough alimony so that Mom didn't need to work. She seemed relieved, even content, as if shedding the responsibilities of a partner allowed her to focus on herself. About a year later, Mom met Eric. At first, he seemed okay. He brought me candy and tried to make me laugh, and he always wore a big, easy smile. They got married pretty quickly, and soon after, my half-sister Emily was born. That's when things started to shift. Eric would give me these looks, like I was intruding on his life. His comments, initially subtle, became increasingly pointed. "Don't you miss your dad?" he'd ask when Mom wasn't around. "Wouldn't you rather live with him?" By the time I was 12, my world was turned upside down again. One night I overheard the conversation that would change everything. It was late, and I had slipped out of bed to get a glass of water. Their voices drifted from the living room, low and tense. "I got the promotion," Eric was saying, his tone firm. "My salary's nearly doubled now. You don't need to work, and we don't need Jessica's child support." "But that money helps," Mom replied, hesitant. "Sarah, come on. You know Jessica would be better off with her dad. It's not like she's fitting in here, and wouldn't it be nice to just focus on our family, on Emily?" The pause before Mom agreed was the longest, most excruciating silence of my life. "You're right," she said eventually. "I'll call Greg tomorrow." I stood frozen in the hallway, the glass of water forgotten in my hand. My own mother was bartering me away like an inconvenient possession because she didn't need my dad's money anymore. The next morning, Mom called me into the kitchen. She had her "let's be positive" smile on, the one that always felt just a little forced. I knew what was coming, but hearing her actually say it still hit me like a punch to the gut. "Megan, sweetie," she began, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I've been thinking, and I really believe it would be best for you to live with your dad." "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, your father can provide more opportunities for you," she said, brushing off the question like it was obvious. "It's a chance for you to have the best of everything." I just nodded, because what else could I do? She wasn't sending me to live with Dad because it was better for me. She was doing it because I was in the way. I could see it in the way she avoided my eyes, in the hurried explanations that followed. By the end of the week, I was packed up and waiting on the porch for Dad to pick me up. He arrived in his old truck, the one that always smelled faintly of sawdust and leather. The moment I saw his face, my throat tightened. He looked so happy to see me, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he got out to grab my bags. "Hey, kiddo," he said, ruffling my hair like he always did. "Ready for a new adventure?" I managed a smile and nodded. "Yeah." The drive to Dad's apartment was quiet, but not awkward. He didn't press me for details about why I was suddenly moving in. Instead, he talked about the room he'd set up for me, how he painted it my favorite color, stocked the bookshelves, and even bought me a new desk. When we got there, I saw he wasn't exaggerating. The walls were a calming shade of blue, and the bedspread matched. The bookshelf was crammed with all my favorite series, and there was even a small terrarium on the desk, complete with a tiny fern and a little ceramic frog. That first night, as I was settling in, Dad sat on the edge of my bed. "I'm sorry things turned out this way," he said, his voice soft but steady. "But I want you to know something. You'll always have a home here. Always." Those words were like a balm on an open wound. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear them until that moment. I clung to them in the months that followed, even as Mom's calls became fewer and far between. They always felt more like obligations than real attempts to check in. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetie," she'd say, her voice cheerful but hollow. "Hope you're doing well." Meanwhile, Dad was there for everything. He came to every parent-teacher conference, cheered me on at my school plays, and sat through hours of debate tournaments. When I started high school, he even helped me choose the private academy that offered the best scholarships, refusing to let me feel guilty about the cost. "Your education is my priority," he'd say whenever I hesitated. "I'll make it work. Don't worry about it." For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I wasn't just a problem that needed solving. Dad made sure of that every single day. High school felt like a fresh start. It wasn't easy at first, adjusting to a new environment, making friends, but Dad was my rock. He encouraged me to join the debate team, knowing how much I loved to argue my point. He was there for every victory and every stumble, always cheering me on with that unwavering belief that I could do anything. Mom, on the other hand, faded further into the background. Our relationship was reduced to the occasional phone call or a generic birthday card that usually arrived late. By then, I'd stopped expecting much from her, so it didn't sting as much anymore. Still, every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering if she ever regretted the way things had turned out. When college applications came around, Dad dove in with me, researching schools and reviewing essays late into the night. I could see the pride in his eyes when I showed him my acceptance letter to Dartmouth. "You did it, Megan," he said, pulling me into a bear hug. "I always knew you would." College was expensive, but Dad never once made me feel like it was a burden. "This is what we've been working for," he said, waving off my concerns about tuition. "Your future is worth every penny." Those 4 years flew by in a blur of late-night study sessions, new friendships, and summer internships. Dad was my biggest cheerleader through it all, and when I graduated with honors, he was right there in the front row, clapping the loudest. After college, I landed a job at a top consulting firm and moved into a small but cozy apartment downtown. It was close enough to Dad's place that we could still have Sunday dinners together, a tradition we'd started years ago. We'd sit in his living room, eating takeout and watching old movies, talking about everything and nothing. Those evenings were my safe haven, a reminder of how lucky I was to have him in my life. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The first sign was subtle, a cough that lingered longer than it should have. Then came the fatigue, the weight loss, the quiet concern in Dad's eyes whenever he thought I wasn't looking. When the diagnosis finally came, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "Stage 4, pancreatic cancer," the doctor said, her tone heavy with sympathy. 6 months, maybe less. Dad took the news with his usual calm, comforting me even as I fell apart. "Hey," he said, squeezing my hand, "we've had a good run, haven't we?" Those last few months were some of the hardest of my life. I took leave from work to be with him, staying by his side through every treatment, every hospital visit. The decline was brutal, and watching the strongest person I'd ever known grow weaker by the day broke something inside me. One night, near the end, he held my hand and said, "You've always been the best thing in my life, Megan. Never forget that." When he passed, I felt like a part of me went with him. The funeral was small but heartfelt, attended by the people who truly mattered to him. Afterward, I went through his things, discovering little mementos he'd kept from my childhood, report cards, photos, the medal I'd won at my first debate tournament. It was like he'd saved every piece of me. Then came the will. He left me everything, the apartment, his savings, even a letter he'd written months earlier. "Take this and build a life you're proud of," it said. "You deserve nothing less." For weeks, I couldn't think about the money or the apartment. All I wanted was my dad back. But life doesn't work that way, and eventually, I had to start piecing myself together again. Life after Dad was quieter, lonelier. I threw myself into work, trying to keep the grief at bay. The apartment he left me became both a comfort and a reminder of everything I'd lost. Sunday dinners turned into solo nights with takeout, the TV humming softly in the background. About a month after the funeral, my phone rang. Seeing Mom's name on the caller ID stopped me cold. I hadn't heard from her in years, not even when Dad was sick. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for whatever this was about. "Megan," she said, her voice soft and hesitant. I just heard about your father. I'm so sorry. Thanks, I replied, unsure of what else to say. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just a little too long. Then she continued, Listen, I know this might not be the right time, but Eric passed away recently too. It was a heart attack. Oh, I said, the news catching me off guard. I'm sorry to hear that. It's been a tough time, she said, sighing heavily. I've been thinking about you a lot. Maybe we could meet for coffee? Catch up? I wasn't sure why I agreed. Maybe it was the grief, or maybe a small foolish part of me wanted to believe she'd changed. Either way, we met the following weekend at a cafe downtown. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, her smile a little less polished. Emily joined us too, though we barely knew each other. She was 21 now, bouncing between jobs and still figuring out her path. I couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment watching her chat easily with Mom, as if their bond had never been questioned or fractured. One coffee turned into regular visits. At first, it felt good to reconnect. I told them about my travels, my job, the places I'd seen. They listened with wide eyes, marveling at my stories. It felt nice. Like maybe we could rebuild something. I started bringing them gifts. Small tokens at first. A scarf for Mom, a pair of earrings for Emily. It felt good to share my success, to give them a taste of the life I'd worked so hard for. But as the visits continued, the gifts became an expectation. Could you bring some new towels next time? Mom asked casually one day. Maybe some makeup too, Emily added with a grin. The requests grew. What started as modest asks, Target towels, drugstore cosmetics, soon turned into shopping lists, designer bags, high-end clothes, groceries. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that I was just being generous, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One evening, after receiving yet another list of demands, I finally snapped. I drove to their house, determined to confront them. Mom, Emily, we need to talk, I said, setting my coffee down on the kitchen table. The requests, they're too much. It's getting out of hand. Mom shifted uncomfortably. What do you mean, sweetie? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I mean the constant asking. It's not fair, and it's not okay. Emily rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. It's not like you can't afford it. You're loaded. That's not the point, I said firmly. Yes, I have money, but it's not an endless supply, and it's my money. I get to decide how I spend it. Wow, Emily shot back, crossing her arms. Real nice, Megan. Your family's struggling, and you're hoarding all that cash your dad left you. I stared at her, my chest tightening. That money came from the parent who actually wanted me, I said quietly, my voice trembling. The one who didn't trade me away when I became inconvenient. The room went silent. Mom looked down at her hands, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in her expression. But it wasn't enough. Not this time. I stood up, grabbed my things, and left. My phone stayed silent for weeks after that. No calls, no texts, no shopping lists. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The silence from Mom and Emily didn't last. A month after our argument, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I debated ignoring it, but eventually picked up, curiosity getting the better of me. Megan, she said, her voice unusually soft. I need to talk to you about something important. What's going on? I asked, wary. It's my knee, she explained. The doctor says I need a total knee replacement. It's serious, Megan. If I don't get it done soon, I might not be able to walk. I frowned. How bad is it? It's really bad, she said, her voice trembling. The best specialist is in Arizona. They can get me in next month, but the whole thing, surgery, hospital stay, rehab, it's going to cost $70,000. My stomach twisted. Memories of Dad's illness came flooding back. How helpless I'd felt watching him suffer, how desperate I'd been to save him. I couldn't let that happen again, not if I could do something about it. I'll help, I said slowly, "but I can't give you the full amount all at once. I can send half now, and the other half when I see the hospital bill." Her tone shifted slightly, a hint of impatience creeping in. "But I need the full amount up front, Megan. The hospital requires it." "That's all I can do right now," I said firmly. "I have to be smart about this." She paused, then sighed. "Let me call the hospital and see if they'll accept a partial payment." A few minutes later, she came back. "They said it's fine," she said, sounding almost relieved. "Half now, half after the surgery." Over the next week, I helped them pack and drove them to the airport. They were supposed to be in Arizona for a month. I wired the $35,000 to Mom's account, trusting her to use it for the surgery. Then, everything unraveled. A few days later, I got a call from Rachel, my best friend from childhood. We'd recently reconnected, grabbing coffee now and then to catch up. "Hey, Megan," she said, her voice hesitant. "This might sound weird, but did you know your mom and Emily are in Europe?" "What?" I asked, laughing nervously. "That's impossible. They're in Arizona for Mom's surgery." Rachel paused. "I thought so too, but my sister showed me some photos Emily sent her. Megan, they're definitely not in Arizona." My phone buzzed with incoming messages. As I opened the photos, my stomach dropped. There was Mom, posing in front of the Trevi fountain, looking perfectly healthy. Emily was in another picture, grinning outside a designer boutique in Rome. Other photos showed my aunt and cousin lounging by a private pool, wine glasses in hand. I stared at the images, my heart pounding. The $35,000 wasn't paying for surgery. It was funding a European vacation. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind replaying every conversation I'd had with Mom. She'd lied, using Dad's illness as a lever to manipulate me into giving her money. By morning, my anger was sharp and cold. I called her, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Hey, Mom, how's the surgery recovery going?" "Oh, great," she said cheerfully. "The doctor says everything went perfectly. I'm already starting physical therapy." "That's wonderful," I said, my tone sweet as syrup. "I'd love to talk to your doctor about the procedure. Could you put him on the phone?" There was a pause. "Oh, he's very busy right now," she stammered. "But there's no need to bother him. Everything's fine." "Right," I said, my grip tightening on my phone. "Well, I'll let you get back to your recovery." The lies didn't stop. Every call she had a new excuse. Poor Wi-Fi, a busy doctor, or physical therapy sessions. I let her dig herself deeper, even as my anger simmered. Then, I decided to call her bluff. "Mom," I said during one call, "just send me the hospital bill directly. I'll pay the rest of the balance myself." "No," she said too quickly. Then, softening her tone, she added, "I mean, that's not necessary. I'll handle it." A week later, I got an email with a supposed hospital bill attached. One look at it, and I almost laughed out loud. The letterhead was blurry, the dates didn't match, and the payment details pointed to Mom's personal bank account. I took a picture of some cash I had on hand, arranged it neatly, and sent it to her with a short message. "Got your bill. Sending money soon." Then, I waited. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I answered, letting her dig herself into an even bigger hole. When she finally stopped talking, I cut her off. "Drop the act, Mom. I know you're in Italy." The silence on the other end was deafening. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then Mom's voice came back, defensive and sharp. "How did you—" "Rachel's sister sent me the pictures," I said, cutting her off. "The Trevi fountain, the boutiques, the villa. I've seen it all. You lied to me, Mom. You used Dad's death and my guilt to scam me out of money for a vacation?" Her tone shifted instantly, the fake concern replaced by indignation. "Fine, yes, we're in Italy. I knew you'd never give us the money for a trip otherwise, but why shouldn't we get to enjoy life too? You're always traveling, Paris, London, New York. Meanwhile, we can barely afford groceries. Not fair?" My voice cracked, but I kept going. Not fair as being 12 years old and hearing my own mother give me away because she didn't need Dad's money anymore. Not fair is you showing up 16 years later, not because you missed me, but because you wanted my money. We can talk about all of that later, she said quickly, her voice turning desperate. Right now, we're in a serious situation. We don't have money for tickets home, and the villa owner is threatening to call the police. We need your help, Megan. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting her words settle. For a moment, I almost caved. Almost. But then I remembered Dad's voice, steady and warm, telling me I deserved better. That's your problem, not mine, I said quietly. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up, and this time, I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I blocked her number and went through every app and social media account, cutting off every possible way she could reach me. Emily, my aunt, my cousin, all of them were blocked. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. 2 weeks later, Grandma called. She was one of the few family members I still trusted, so I answered. Megan, honey, she began, her voice heavy. Your mom called me. She says she needs $115,000 to get home. I don't have that kind of money, and I thought maybe… Grandma, I interrupted gently. Let me tell you what's really going on. I laid it all out for her. The fake surgery, the trip to Italy, the forgery attempt. When I finished, there was a long pause. Oh, Megan, she said finally, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I had no idea she'd do something like this. It's not your fault, I said. They got themselves into this mess. They'll have to figure their own way out. A few days later, Rachel called me again. You're not going to believe this, she said, barely containing her laughter. Emily's running a fundraiser on social media, claiming you abandoned them in Italy. She's playing the victim, saying you're a heartless millionaire who left her family stranded. I couldn't help but laugh. How's that working out for them? Not great, Rachel replied. They had to sell the designer clothes and bags they bought just to pay off some of the villa rental. They're back now, but it's a mess. Your mom and aunt aren't even speaking anymore because your mom tried to make her cover part of the trip. I shook my head, the absurdity of it all almost comical. Their grand European adventure had imploded spectacularly, and for once, I wasn't part of the fallout. A month later, Grandma called again with an update. They're still struggling, she said, her tone sad but resigned. Sarah accused me of choosing you over her when I wouldn't send her money. Don't feel bad, Grandma, I said. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions. After we hung up, I stood by the window of my apartment, Dad's apartment, and watched the sun dip below the skyline. On my desk was a stack of brochures for my next trip, this time to Greece. The old me might have felt guilty about enjoying life while Mom and Emily struggled. The old me might have reached out, tried to fix things one last time, but that version of me was gone, replaced by someone who understood the value of boundaries and self-respect. Dad's words echoed in my mind, as clear as if he were standing beside me. You were the best thing in my life, Megan. Never forget that. I hadn't forgotten, and now I finally understood. I was lucky to have had one parent who truly loved me, who taught me my worth, and who gave me the courage to let go of the relationships that only brought me pain. Mom and Emily could keep their drama. I had my father's love, his legacy, and a life I was proud of. And that was more than enough story. I frequently reflect on how my life would have turned out if my parents hadn't separated when I was 7 years old. I was just Jessica Thompson at the time, a typical child living with my parents in a comfortable home they had jointly purchased. Family meals, weekend excursions to the park, and bedtime tales read by both parents were all basic pleasures during those formative years, as I recall. When they parted ways, everything was different. Dad made sure we were financially supported and left us the house when he moved away. Mom appeared to be quite pleased that he paid enough alimony to relieve her of the need to work. Mom met Steve a year later. At first he tried to make me laugh, and always brought candy when he came to visit, so he seemed pleasant enough. They were married shortly after the birth of my half-sister Cindy. Things began to alter at that point. Steve started staring at me as if I were in the way. When Mom wasn't around, he would say tiny things. For example, "Do you not miss your father? Or do you not want to live with him?" When I heard the talk that would alter my life, I was 12 years old. "Look," Steve said in a stern yet hushed voice. "At work I was promoted. My pay almost doubled. There won't be any job for you. Or child support for Jessica, although that money helps," Mom answered. "It's really profitable. Sarah, hurry up. Jessica would do better with her father, as we both know. Furthermore, wouldn't it be pleasant to concentrate just on Cindy and our family?" How did she not hesitate earlier? One thing I will always remember is agreeing. "You're correct. Tomorrow, I'll give Mark a call to discuss taking Jessica." In order to avoid making a sound, I kept my palm over my mouth while I stood there in the dark. As I pondered what I had just heard, I forgot about the glass of water I had requested. My own mother no longer needed my father's money, therefore she was trading me away. In retrospect, I question whether they were aware that I overheard the exchange. When Mom announced that I would be moving in with Dad, she pretended that she was doing me a favor. As if she wasn't simply getting rid of me because I'd become financially inconvenient, she continued, "You'll have more opportunities there." Dad embraced me wholeheartedly. No inquiries were made. He had painted my favorite color, stocked the bookcase with all the series, and prepared a room in his apartment for me. That first night at his apartment, I really enjoyed reading. "I'm sorry things turned out this way, youngster, but I want you to know something," he added as he perched on the side of my bed. "With me, you will always have a home, always." In the years that followed, those words served as my compass, while my mother occupied herself with her new family and hardly spoke to me outside of the required holiday calls. Dad was always there. Parent-teacher conferences and school productions. He helped me get into a reputable private school, supported my hobbies, and never made me feel like a burden, even when my first crush broke my heart. He sat with me night after night while I researched colleges and reviewed writings for college applications. I can still clearly recall the day I received my Princeton acceptance letter. Dad was reading it with tears in his eyes. "You succeeded, child." Pulling me into a bear embrace, he murmured, "I've always known you would." Dad never grumbled about the high cost of college. "My top focus is your education. Every time I mention the price," he would say. The 4 years passed quickly, and before I knew it, I was earning an honors degree and working for one of the city's leading consulting businesses. I rented a lovely flat in the heart of the city, close to my dad's house. As we had done since I was 12, we sat down to supper every Sunday. When he inquired about my job, I would update him on my most recent endeavors. We would occasionally just watch old films in cozy silence, exactly as we used to do when I was in high school. Up until it wasn't, everything was ideal. The diagnosis was unexpected. Pancreatic cancer in stage 4. 6 months, the physician stated. They had hope. Dad only compensated. I lost him when I was 28. The past several weeks have been cruel. To be with him in the hospital, I took time off from work. He stated, "You were the best thing in my life," as he clutched my hand one night towards the end. "Jessica, remember that always." I found out he had left me everything after he died. He had $700,000 in his accounts and a lovely flat in the heart of the city. I was unable to even consider the money. I simply missed my father. A month following the burial, my phone rang. When I saw my mother on the caller ID, I nearly lost it. "Jessica." She spoke hesitantly. "I've heard about your dad. I'm so sorry." It had been years since I last heard from her. "Regards," I was able to say. I realized that this may not be the ideal moment, but Steve died not long ago. "Heart attack." She hesitated. "You've been on my mind a lot." Perhaps I was susceptible because I was grieving, or perhaps I simply wanted to think that people could change. However, I ended up agreeing to get coffee with her. A single cup of coffee led to many trips. Cindy was a newborn when I first got to see her in person. She was now 21 and appeared to be aimless, flitting between job interviews. In contrast to her time when she didn't have to work, Mom was now employed as a cashier at the neighborhood grocery. I began going to see them many times a month. I informed them about my travels, including my European holidays and weekend getaways to several locations. I always gave them presents that they couldn't purchase on their own, like excellent fragrances for Mom, brand clothes for Cindy, and small indulgences. In a way, it felt nice. Being able to tell them about my accomplishments, it turned into a pattern. Even if I was only stopping over for a short cup of coffee, I couldn't arrive at Mom's home without anything. If I didn't bring anything, I'd feel bad. I started going to the local mall before every visit. The clothing I brought back from Europe were extremely well received by Cindy. Every time I took anything from my suitcase, her eyes would light up. "Jess, oh my God, is this from the Parisian boutique?" She would shriek and show off whatever high-end item I had brought her. I first liked their responses. Perhaps I was attempting to purchase the love I was never given as a child. I would carefully select items that I believed they would enjoy. Mom, a cashmere jumper, Cindy, a leather purse. Then one day I made the decision to find out what they truly want. Oh, there was no way I could. Mom's gaze shifted to her coffee cup. Perhaps just some brand new Target towels. At first, Cindy was just as apprehensive. Perhaps some cosmetics from the pharmacy. But after that, something changed. The demands began to increase in size and frequency. Mom started emailing me whole shopping lists instead of just asking for towels. "When you're in Milan next month, please read this text, honey. We spotted that Gucci purse online. Could you pick it up? Cindy also needs new winter clothing badly. It would be lovely to have Prada. Oh, and our grocery supply is becoming low." My gut churned as I gazed at my phone. The list continued to grow in length and difficulty. Luxury goods were no longer the only ones. After getting yet another long list, they asked me to pay for their basic needs for one evening. I made the decision that enough was enough. I was determined to have a serious chat, so I headed to their place. "We need to discuss these demands, Mom and Cindy." Sitting at their kitchen table, I said. Mom moved in her chair uneasily. "Sweetheart, what do you mean? The lists, the items that are always being asked for. Things are getting out of control." Cindy rolled her eyes and said, "Come on. You can afford it after all. You're loaded." "The point isn't that." Trying to stabilize my kid, I answered, "I do have money though." "However what?" Cindy cut me off. "While your family is struggling, you will just stockpile everything. You can't support your impoverished family. You travel constantly, and you have that nice flat. You're wealthy. You're being self-centered because your dad left her all that money." My face began to heat up. Selfish. The parent who genuinely desired me gave me the money. The one who kept me around when I started to cause trouble. The room fell quiet. Finally getting to my feet, I responded, "It's my money, and I'll decide how to spend it." "Very pleasant, Jess," Cindy spit. "A really kind approach to show your family love." I slammed the door behind me as I left. My phone was quiet for the following month. No texts, no calls, and no requests. A part of me was relieved, while another part was saddened. My phone rang after I had been silent for a month. Mom was the one. "Jessica, would you mind coming over, honey? I need to discuss something essential with you." I was concerned about something in her voice. I ended up heading to her place that afternoon, in spite of our recent dispute. When I got there, Mom was seated at the kitchen table and appeared more reserved than normal. Cindy lingered close by, her expression unusually solemn. "What's happening?" I inquired, sitting down. Mom took my hand and reached across the table. "Jessica, I've went to visit a doctor. My knee is the problem. I need surgery immediately, they say. A complete knee replacement." I felt sick to my stomach. "How serious is it?" "Dairy." Her voice wavered as she spoke. "According to the doctor, I could become incapacitated if I don't get it done right away. I would no longer be able to work." I reflected on my father, how rapidly things had deteriorated following his diagnosis, and how powerless I had felt as I watched him suffer. "The problem is," Mom went on, "Arizona is home to the top specialist for this type of surgery. They have a spot available," but she stopped and looked at Cindy. "Everything. Surgery, hospitalization, recovery. The price will be $70,000. $70,000, I said again. "I realize that's a lot," Mom said hastily. "However, Cindy will accompany me to assist with my recuperation. About a month will pass during the entire course of treatment and rehabilitation. As I sat there, the hospital hallways, the beeping machines, and the helpless feeling of witnessing someone you love suffer came flooding back to me. I couldn't allow that to occur once more. Not if I could prevent it. "I'll help," I heard myself say. "But I can't give you the whole amount at once. I can give you half now. $35,000 and the other half when I get the hospital bill." Mom's face darkened, "But I need all of it up front." "The hospital?" "Mom?" I interrupted. "That's all I can do right now. I need to be smart about this." She started to protest, but Cindy put a hand on her shoulder. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. "Actually," Mom said, her tone shifting, "let me call the hospital. Maybe I can arrange to pay in 2 installments." She left the room with her phone and I heard her voice drifting from the hallway. A few minutes later, she returned, looking relieved. "They said it would be fine," she announced. "We can pay half now and half after the surgery." The next few days were a blur of preparations. I transferred the first $35,000 to Mom's account. A week later, I helped them pack their bags and drove them to the airport. A few days after Mom and Cindy left, I was sitting in my home office reviewing some work documents when my phone buzzed. The name that popped up made me smile. Rachel Martinez, my best friend from elementary school. We'd known each other since we were 6, but after I moved in with Dad, we mostly kept in touch through social media. Recently, we'd started meeting up again for coffee and catching up on lost time. "Hey, Rach, what's up?" "Jess." There was something odd in her voice. "I need to ask you something weird. Did you know your mom and sister are in Europe?" I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. "What? No, they're in Arizona. Mom's having me surgery." "Yeah, that's what I thought too." But Rachel paused. "My sister just showed me these photos that Cindy sent her. They're definitely not in Arizona." My phone pinged with incoming messages with each new photo that loaded. I felt like I was being punched in the gut. There was Mom looking perfectly healthy, posing in front of the Trevi Fountain, Cindy taking selfies outside designer boutiques in Rome. Mom, Sister Angela, and her daughter Emma lounging by a private pool at what looked like an expensive villa. Each photo was time-stamped, yesterday's date clearly visible. "There's more," Rachel said hesitantly. My sister said, "Cindy's been bragging about the whole thing. Apparently your mom bought one-way tickets for everyone herself. Cindy, your Aunt Angela, and your cousin Emma. They've rented some luxury villa for a month, and they're shopping at Aldi's high-end stores and eating at fancy restaurants." I sat there staring at a photo of my mother, my supposedly surgery-bound mother sipping wine at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Italian countryside. The $35,000 I'd given her for medical expenses was being spent on a European vacation. I spent the night tossing and turning, looking at those photos over and over. How could they do this? How could they lie so brazenly, taking advantage of my concern about Mom's health? They'd played me using my memories of Dad's illness to manipulate me into giving them money. The next morning, I called Mom. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. "How did the surgery go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Oh, that went wonderfully." The doctor stated everything went wonderfully. "I'm already begun rehabilitation." I grasped the edge of my desk, knuckles becoming white. The nonchalant manner she lied made me feel terrible. "That's amazing," I responded, my voice pouring with barely restrained wrath. "I'd delighted to chat to your doctor about the operation." "Could you put him on?" "There was a small delay." "Oh, he's extremely busy right now, honey. Besides, there's no need to annoy him. Look, I need to go. They're contacting me for physical therapy." The telephone went dead before I could answer. A flood of memories washed over me as I sat there looking at my phone. When I was 12, my mother gave me away since she no longer needed my father's money. Mom finally got in touch with me when my father passed away and gave me his estate. Mom expects me to pay for her lifestyle, so she sends me shopping lists. And now this, the ultimate act of treachery. I chose to comply with their pretense by phoning my mother daily to inquire about her recuperation. Every time she prepared a fresh justification, "Honey, the doctor is currently undergoing surgery. Today, he is attending a seminar. Other patients are being seen by him. His leave of absence ends tomorrow." When the performer kept forgetting their lines and making up new ones on the scene, it was like watching a lousy play. Partly out of rage, and half because I was amazed at how absurd her explanations were becoming, I began to compile a list of them. During one call, I tried to seem worried and said, "Mom, we might be able to video chat. I simply want to check in with you, make sure the hospital is pleasant for you." On the other end, there was a rustling sound, most likely her covering the phone while she spoke with Cindy about her next move. "I look awful right now, darling, all bruised and swollen. In addition, the hospital's Wi-Fi is terrible," continues to cut off. In the background, I could hear a little Italian pop music. Really, I hit that odd button for a prestigious hospital. You are aware of the nature of these things. "Quickly," she said. "Listen, I have to leave. It's time for my physical therapy session." I phoned again later. I chose to take a different tack. "Just give me the hospital bill straight, Mom. The remaining $35,000 will be sent to their account by me." Her tone softened, but she spoke too soon to use force. "That's not essential, really. Simply transfer money to my account, and I will take care of any hospital-related matters." Here they now recognize me. I didn't call again after that exchange. Allow them to perspire a bit. Mom's number showed up on my phone a week later, I thought. As I watched it ring, I could picture her becoming increasingly alarmed as she realized that the money would not actually arrive. Then the text arrived. "Jessica, the hospital is requesting quick payment. Threats of sending the bill to collections are being made. We really need the money, please." I waited for hours before penning my response, taking my time. "No issue. Simply send me the hospital bill, and I'll take care of it right away." Then there was silence. It lasted for 3 days. I was aware that they were frantically attempting to decide what to do next. Then I received an email with the subject, "Urgent hospital bill attached," in my inbox. I nearly burst out laughing when I opened the attachment. They hadn't even attempted to make it appear authentic. The hazy letterhead was obviously a copy from another source. 6 months have passed since the date. Most revealingly, the payment information section included Mom's personal bank account, and the hospital's address was given as California rather than Arizona. I was both amused and very saddened as I gazed at this pitiful attempt at counterfeit. I took pictures of a pile of $100 notes that I had taken out earlier that week, arranging them as if they were on my desk. "Have you received your bill?" I replied, "Sent you the money and sent the pictures." Before pressing the submit button, my finger briefly lingered over it. "Come on, Mom," I said. "Let's wait and see what narrative you think of next." Less than an hour after I emailed the pictures, my phone rang. I inhaled deeply before responding as Mom's name appeared on the screen. "Jessica." She spoke in a panicky, high-pitched voice. "What's happening? What happened to the remaining funds? We've been holding out." "Mom, stop the act." I interrupted her speech. "I made a call. You're not in a hospital, and I know precisely where you are. What are you discussing? You're in a villa in Italy with Cindy, Angela, and Emma, dining at upscale restaurants and shopping at luxury shops." There was a pause in the queue. Her mind was racing, trying to decide how to spend this, and I could almost hear it. "How did you—" she began. The pictures Cindy sent to Rachel's sister were shown to Rachel, who forwarded them to me. "Did you truly think I wouldn't find out?" I asked. "I've witnessed everything. The shopping excursions, the villa, everything." "You scared me out of money for a vacation by using my father's passing, my grief, and my guilt about not being able to save him." One more pause. Then she spoke in a different tone. Defensive rage took the place of the phony concern. "All right. Indeed, Italy is where we are. I was aware that you would never pay for our trip. However, why shouldn't we be able to travel there? You're always on your way. New York, London, and Paris. Cindy and I, meanwhile, hardly have enough money for groceries. It's unfair." "Unfair?" I was trembling when I spoke. "Right now. Unfair. When you were 12 years old, did your mother sell you because she no longer needed your father's money? Unfair. 16 years later, is it still the same mother? Your father passed away and left you money, not because she misses you. We can discuss all of that later," she said hastily. "We are currently facing a significant issue. We still have to pay the bill, but we don't have any money for tickets home. Rent. Everyone must return to their jobs. We cannot be laid off. Jessica, please." That additional $35,000 is necessary. I was finally able to see things properly in that moment. There had been no change. When I became financially inconvenient, she was still the same lady who had abandoned me. Only now she wanted me back. Or rather, she wanted my money back. I stated bluntly, "That's your problem, not mine. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up and instantly blocked her phone. Then I went through every social media outlet, every messaging app, every potential method they could reach me, and banned them all. Mom, Cindy, Angela, Aunt, everyone who was part of the plan, sitting there in my apartment's quiet. Dad left me the flat. Something changed inside of me. The final hope that my mother could genuinely be interested in me. Instead of wanting her daughter's money, she could really desire a relationship with her. 2 weeks after I banned everyone, he finally passed away. My grandma gave me a call. I nearly didn't respond. However, Mom and Grandma had never been the same. More sincere, more truthful. "Jessica." "Honey," she murmured in an anxious tone, "I got a call from your mom. She stated that she desperately needed $15,000. Although I don't have that much money, I figured you may." "Grandma," I said softly, "let me explain what actually took place." I told her everything. The phony procedure, the trip to Italy, the con to steal my money. I could hear her becoming larger with every detail. At last, she murmured, "Oh, Jessica. I'm so sorry. It never occurred to me that Sarah would do this." "Grandma, don't worry about them," I reassured her. "They created this situation for themselves. They are able to escape." Fortunately, I didn't have to wait long to learn how they accomplished it. A few days later, Rachel gave me a call. "Have you seen Cindy's social media activity?" she inquired. I had blocked them everywhere, so I hadn't. Rachel then went on to tell me, "She is organizing this fundraising on the grounds that her affluent sister left them in Italy with no means of transportation. She is portraying you as a cold-hearted, wealthy individual who abandoned her impoverished family and left them trapped abroad." I experienced a well-known spike in fury, but this time it was accompanied by another emotion. Laughter. "How are things going for them?" I inquired. According to Rachel, they attempted to raise the funds for over 2 weeks. All of the expensive clothing and purses they had purchased had to be sold. Because they were unable to pay the rent, and get this, the villa owner apparently threatened to contact the police. They all remained far longer than their allotted vacation time, which almost cost them their jobs. As I shook my head, I reflected on how disastrously their big European excursion had turned out. Grandma gave another call a month later with an update. "They're back at last," she remarked. "It's a mess, though, Jessica. Your mother is no longer in contact with your Aunt Angela." After things broke apart, Sarah apparently insisted that she help pay for the trip, and I was unable to give her the money for her return tickets, which led to a horrific argument between us. In fact, she said that I had chosen you above her. "Grandma, I'm sorry you were drawn into this. Don't be. Sometimes, dear, individuals have to deal with the fallout from their choices." After we hung up, I went to my dad's flat and stared out over the city from the window. The sky was tinted in tones of pink and orange as the sun descended. A pile of trip pamphlets waited on my desk. I was organizing my next vacation, which would take me to Greece. It's possible that the previous version of myself felt bad about going when Mom and Cindy were struggling. Perhaps I asked them along when I was younger. I made another attempt to establish the kind of relationship I had always desired with them. However, that me was no longer there, replaced by a more powerful individual. An individual who at last realized that certain relationships are not worth preserving. I kept thinking about Dad's final remarks to me when I was in the hospital. "Jessica, you were the greatest thing in my life. Remember that always." I realized at last that I had been fortunate, and I hadn't forgotten. I am fortunate to have had a single mom who taught me the value of myself, placed me first, and genuinely loved me. Mom and Cindy were free to continue their plots and deceit. I inherited my father's legacy, his affection, and, above all, my dignity. I live a tranquil life these days. I work hard at my career, travel whenever I want, and hang out with people that appreciate me for who I am, rather than what I can provide them. Grandma occasionally gives me tidbits of information concerning Mom and Cindy. They continue to struggle, act like victims, and search for their next victim. However, their drama no longer affects me. Story 3. My brother Tommy was born when I was 7 years old. My name is Riley. He entered the world too soon. I recall hitting the glass with my nose, observing him as he lay in that transparent cage filled with cables and tubes. Everything started to alter at that point. In order to spend more time with Tommy, Mom changed jobs to part-time work. She would spend hours simply observing his breathing while sitting in the rocking rocker next to his incubator. After work, Dad would head directly to the hospital without even pausing to greet me at home. Things didn't improve when Tommy eventually returned home. They worsened. As I learned to take care of myself, Mom would leap at the slightest hint of his whining. Mom became too busy nursing Tommy to help me make my own lunch sandwiches. Since no one had time to assist me anymore, I learned how to tie my shoes and fix my own hair. My 7th birthday was the first time I truly realized how different things were. Mom and Dad entirely forgot about it. That morning, I waited for someone to say something, bring out a cake, or just wish me a happy birthday while I sat at the kitchen table. Dad was reading the newspaper, while Mom was busy trying to convince Tommy to finish his breakfast. Not until that evening, when my teacher, Mrs. E. Roberts, called to wish me a happy birthday. Mom did recall. As a gift, she handed me one of Tommy's old plush animals and hastily put together a little cake. But even with his name on the tag, I discovered that I could find solace elsewhere, mostly at my Aunt Sarah's place. In contrast to my parents, she saw me. She was Dad's younger sister. In many respects, her husband, Uncle Mark, and their daughter Emma were my biological family. I began spending more and more time with them because they lived right across town. Emma and I would go shopping together, and she would treat us the same way and purchase us identical clothes. Mom once noticed me wearing a brand new frock that Sarah had purchased for me. A mixture of guilt and rage disfigured her features. "You're pampering her, Sarah." That evening, she called and complained, "Your presents are too expensive for us to keep up with." In actuality, they had enough of money for Tommy. I wore the same clothing until they actually broke apart, while he got new toys nearly every week. When I was 11 years old, I recall one specific occurrence. I'm still furious over it. When I consider it, one day after school, my instructor called Mom aside. "But Riley worries me, Mrs. Anderson." "Quietly," Miss Thompson said. "She hasn't changed her wardrobe in 2 months. They're becoming quite worn out." Mom's face flushed. "Well, those are simply her favorite outfits." She lied with ease. She is adamant about wearing them. Children are like that. However, Mom's humiliation turned to anger when we arrived home. She took hold of my arm so firmly that it was marked. "You have no right to humiliate us in that way." She hit me across the face with her scream. "Do you want to be perceived as poor parents by everyone?" At least to myself, I wanted to yell back that they were terrible parents. But I simply watched Tommy play with his new remote control vehicle while I held my burning cheek in the adjacent room. I was less of a daughter and more of a living maid by the time Tommy turned 8. Each morning began in the same manner. Get up early, prepare everyone's breakfast, assemble Tommy's meal, and tidy up after everyone. In addition to a list of other jobs my mother had come up with during the day, the dishes were always waiting for me when I returned home from school. I eventually lost it one evening after spending hours preparing supper, doing laundry, and assisting Tommy with his schoolwork. My back hurt from standing all day, and my hands were sore from cleaning pots. "Mom, I'm worn out." My voice cracked as I spoke. "Is there anyone else that can assist with the housework?" Just long enough to say that, Dad looked up from his phone. "Riley, you're 13 now. You're old enough to assist with household chores. That is the behavior of responsible adults. However, Tommy is not required to take any action." Mom yelled at Tommy, who was still little, when I objected. "He requires some time to be a kid." I also wanted to shout that I was still a kid. However, what was the purpose? I ended up spending more and more time at Aunt Sarah's place instead. I found refuge at their house, where I might be a child again. Despite being 5 years my junior, Emma grew up to be the younger sister I wish Tommy had been. Together, we would spend hours building intricate structures, something I was never able to accomplish at home since Tommy would constantly ruin my creations. I occasionally stayed overnight, sleeping in their spare room, which over time gathered some of my belongings, including a few books, a toothbrush, and some pajamas. Neither of my parents ever phoned to see how I was doing. They probably didn't even realize I was absent much of the time. Uncle Mark turned into the much-needed father figure in my life. Late into the night, he would frequently catch me working on my schoolwork at their kitchen table. He helped me with my math one night and remarked, "You know, Riley, you have a wonderful future ahead of you, even if your parents may not realize it. However, you must concentrate on your schoolwork. When such scholarships are awarded, get high marks, because, as much as I hate to say it, I don't believe your parents will be providing financial aid for college." Although his remarks were harsh, they also gave me direction. With newfound vigor, I threw myself into my studies. I became a member of the school's debate club and practiced 3 days a week after school. I participated in every academic challenge I could find, including math Olympics, scientific fairs, and essay contests. I defeated students from 15 other schools to take first place in the regional debating tournament. Even a little article about it appeared in the local newspaper. My mother gave the article a quick look and remarked, "That's nice, dear," when I showed it to them over dinner. "Tell Riley about your goal in today's football practice, Tommy." But their lack of interest just motivated me to put in more effort. I began attending advanced placement classes and stayed up late to finish homework for extra credit. My parents didn't notice, but my instructors did. They began recommending college preparation classes and summer academic activities. I worked as a waitress after school for the first time in my life when I turned 16, landing my first real job at Sunshine Cafe. I had my own money, which I had earned on my own. I felt liberated when I received my first paycheck. I recall looking at the paper's numbers and making plans for what I could purchase, such as school supplies I wouldn't have to beg for, or possibly some new clothes that would fit. However, my brief period of autonomy was short-lived. One evening, with Dad standing behind her with his arms folded, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "So," she said in a sharp voice, "when did you intend to share your work with us? While you live with us, eat our food, and use our utilities, you are earning money." Dad gave a nod. "We've come to the conclusion that you should pay a portion of the household expenses. It should be covered by half of your paycheck." Nevertheless, despite losing half of my income, I was still able to save enough money to purchase a smartphone for myself. Nothing super fancy, but it was new and it was mine. It was my first actual piece of technology. Tommy had the newest iPhone, and I had been using an old flip phone that could hardly send texts. That phone made me very proud. I downloaded educational apps, used it to take notes in class, even joined some study groups online for a week. Everything was perfect. Then Tommy spotted me using it. "Hey, that's a nice phone," he said, walking into my room without knocking. "Way better than that piece of junk you had before. Give it to me." I clutched the phone tighter. "No way. I bought this with my own money." His face twisted into that familiar spoiled expression. "Come on, my phone is getting old. I need a new one." When I refused again, he stormed out. I could hear him thundering down the stairs, and I knew exactly where he was going. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, Mom and Dad appeared in my doorway. "Riley," Dad said in his reasonable voice. That was anything but reasonable. "Your brother tells us you're being selfish." "I bought this phone myself," I said, trying to keep my boy steady with the money I earned after giving you half of my paycheck. They left eventually, but not before calling me ungrateful, selfish, and a terrible sister. I went to bed that night with my phone clutched tight to my chest. 3 days later, I found it in pieces on my bedroom floor. The screen was shattered. The case cracked open like someone had deliberately stomped on it. When I confronted Tommy, he just smirked. "Maybe you should take better care of your things," he said with a shrug. "Stuff breaks sometimes." The day my college acceptance letters arrived should have been one of the happiest days of my life. All those late nights studying, the extra classes, the academic competitions, they had finally paid off. 3 colleges had accepted me: Riverside University, Wellington College, and our local state university. I sat on my bed spreading the letters out in front of me. Riverside and Wellington were my dream schools, but they both required substantial tuition payments. State University wasn't as prestigious, but they'd offered me a full scholarship. The choice was obvious. I couldn't afford to pay for college on my own, and I knew better than to expect help from my parents. There was just one catch. The acceptance letter from State University included a note about housing. As you reside within city limits, you do not qualify for student housing. Our dormitories are reserved for out-of-state and long-distance students only. I decided to share the news with my parents over dinner that night. Tommy was there too, shoveling pasta into his mouth while playing some game on his phone. The latest model, of course. I got accepted to college, I announced, trying to keep the pride in my voice. 3 of them, actually. I'm going to attend State University. They're offering me a full scholarship. To my surprise, both my parents looked up. Mom even smiled. "Well, that's wonderful, Riley," Dad said, actually, sounding pleased for once. "You see what hard work can accomplish." I felt a warm glow in my chest. Maybe things were finally changing. Maybe they were finally seeing me. Then Mom cleared her throat. "Now that you're going to be an adult student, we need to discuss your living arrangements. We've decided you should pay rent." When they named the amount, I literally choked on my pasta. Tommy had to pound me on the back, looking far too amused by my distress. That's almost $1,000? I gasped when I could breathe again. "That's impossible. I can't afford that." Mom shrugged, taking a delicate bite of her dinner. "We pay rent for this house every month. Riley have been for years. You're an adult now. It's time you learnt about real-world obligations." "But I'll be a full-time student," I protested. "Even if I work 2 half-time jobs, I can make that much." My parents shared a glance I'd seen many times before, the one that indicated problems for me. "Well," Dad said slowly, "if you can't contribute to the household expenditures, perhaps it's time you sought your own place to live. Time to stand on your own 2 feet. "But what about Tommy?" I couldn't help asking. "Will he have to pay rent when he gets 18? That's different," Dad snapped. "There are specific needs for your sibling, particular requirements." Tommy was now in excellent health. Since he was a toddler, he had never experienced any health problems. But I realized there was no use in disputing. The following 2 days were devoted to putting my life into bags and cartons. Not much. I had few belongings because I was the less popular child for years. Every item I packed served as a reminder of all the love and things I had never experienced. Tommy's voice could be heard behind me as I carried my final box out the front door. "At last," he growled, "I'll create the best possible gaming setup in your room." Since there is nowhere else for the gaming chairs to go, I could move the large TV to where your bed was. That night, I was standing on Aunt Sarah's porch, ringing the doorbell and fighting back tears. Uncle Mark yelled for Aunt Sarah as soon as he opened the door after glancing at my face and the suitcases at my feet. What did they do? And when I told Sarah what had happened, her voice raised in rage. "You were expelled?" I was unable to pay their rent, so they had their own daughter. My voice broke as I said, "I don't care if you're 18 or 80, they said, because I'm 18 now." Uncle Mark cut in, his cheeks flushed with rage. "Are you going to stay with us? Don't argue." I lay in their guest room that night. I eventually let myself weep in my room. Not only out of fear or despair, but out of relief. I felt completely at home for the first time in my life. Sarah and Uncle Mark insisted that I concentrate on getting ready for school, so they wouldn't allow me pay the rent or purchase food while I worked full-time at Sunshine Cafe that summer, saving every cent I could for college fees. I began attending classes at State University in the autumn. It was challenging to juggle my studies and half-time job at the cafe, but I was committed to succeeding, and Sarah and Uncle Mark treated me the same way they had Emma. They helped me with my homework, celebrated my accomplishments, and even insisted that I go to the beach with them as part of their family holiday. Being seen as an equal part of the family was odd. Every time they presented me to their friends as a Riley, every time they featured me in family pictures, it made me feel better every time they displayed my accomplishments on the wall next to Emma's. Tommy and my parents stopped talking to one another. Every time we crossed paths on the street, they would perceive me as though I were imperceptible, At first it hurt, but with time, I came to the realization that it hurt less than it had while they were in my life. Tommy, however, was unable to let well enough alone. He came in with several of his pals one day when I was working at the cafe. His smile told me right once that this was no accident. Well, when I walked over to their table, he gave a big drawl. "Guys, look who it is." After graduating from college, my sister, the waitress, continued to serve coffee. His pal snickered, living the dream. I took out my order pad while maintaining a neutral expression. "Greetings from Sunshine Cafe. What am I able to get you?" "Oh, I'm not sure." Tommy pretended to read the menu. "What would you suggest? You know a lot about inexpensive meals, don't you?" His pals laughed again. For the following 20 minutes, Tommy ordered and returned everything I had brought. The coffee was too hot, then too cold, and everyone complained about it. That there was too much mayo on one sandwich and then not enough. Perhaps if you had done some valuable research rather than simply fleeing your house. As I cleaned their table, he spoke loudly. "This work would not be a dead end for you." I kept cleaning the table, recalling Aunt Sarah's words, even though I wanted to tell him that I wasn't stuck somewhere, and that I chose to work here while I worked towards my true professional objectives. Some people can only feel large by making others feel little, because they are so tiny on the inside. I got an entry-level job with Anderson & Mills Consulting after I graduated from college. Although the pay wasn't great, it was consistent, and more significantly, it gave you a foot in the door. I approached the assignment with the same zeal that had carried me through my academic career. I located a modest one-bedroom flat across town after receiving my second salary check. I informed Uncle Mark and Sarah that I was leaving. They both started crying. "Do you really want to remain any longer?" As she helped me pack, Aunt Sarah inquired, "Here, you are always welcome." I gave her a strong embrace. "I understand, but it's time for me to take charge of my life. In addition to others, you will become tired of me because I am so frequent." And I fulfilled my pledge. Every holiday, every Sunday meal, and some evening visits, I assured them that they remained a part of my family. When Emma needed a respite from college life, she would come over to my flat for sister sleepovers, and I would assist her with her homework, much as Uncle Mark had previously assisted me. I climbed the corporate ladder throughout the years, weekend projects, late nights, and extra certificates. I took any necessary action. My perseverance paid off. By the time I was 28, I had risen to the position of Senior Operations Director, with a staff of 30, and making more money than I could have ever imagined. I'm considering purchasing a home. One Sunday, while having supper with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark, I made the announcement. Something with a pool, perhaps, or a lovely garden. Aunt Sarah smiled and said, "That's fantastic. That recalls me, I see. Last week, I met your mom at the supermarket. I made an effort to let her know how well you were doing. Perhaps, I reasoned, after all these years." She gave a headshake. Before I could say anything more, she interrupted. "Claimed she doesn't care what you're doing and doesn't have a daughter." Like poison, the words lingered in the air. Uncle Mark grabbed my hand and gave it a squeeze. I wasn't depressed, though. In fact, I felt completely clear about what I needed to do for the first time in years. I gave my friend Jennifer, a realtor, a call the following day. "I'm in need of a favor, Jen. Are you able to identify the owner of the residence located at 1247 Maple Street?" Jennifer returned the call with the owner's number. The property had been owned by Mr. Peterson for more than 20 years. My family had been renting it the whole time. As I dialed his number, my hand trembled a little. "Riley Anderson is my name, Mr. Peterson. I would like to purchase your Maple Street property. I'm willing to pay 20% more than the going rate. Cash transaction. Close quickly." I signed the last documents 2 weeks later, while seated in a lawyer's office. I couldn't help but smile as I wrote my name on the final page. I now owned the home where I had endured so much suffering. Tommy and my parents continued to reside there, oblivious to the fact that their landlord had changed. The next day, I gave Jennifer another call. I asked for one more favor. As their real estate agent, could you get in touch with my parents? Inform them that the new owner of the house wants to see it and talk about their lease. Don't mention my name, please. "Oh, this is going to be fun," Jennifer chuckled. When do you want to do it? We arranged the date for the following Tuesday. I spent the morning checking the property records, making sure everything was in perfect order before I headed to my former residence. My heart was beating, but not from fear, from anticipation. The house looked precisely the same as when I'd left it 6 years earlier. I rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door, and for a second we simply gazed at each other. Her face swung from astonishment to shock to rage. Just a few seconds. "What are you doing here, Riley?" she made a demand. I heard Tommy's heavy footsteps coming down the stairs. Then Dad emerged behind her. "Leave now!" Dad lost his temper. "We are awaiting a significant individual. The home's new owner is scheduled to visit and have a look around." With a smile, I took the deed out of my briefcase. "He's already here, I see. The house was purchased by me 2 weeks ago. Do you want to view the supporting documentation?" The ensuing hush was deafening. Tommy's jaw was hanging wide when he reached the foot of the steps. It's not possible," Dad stumbled. As a senior operations director at one of the leading consulting firms in the city, it is actually quite achievable. As I walked past them and inside the home, I answered, "My home." My offer made Mr. Peterson very delighted. It was almost funny how their faces changed. "Riley," Mom's frown turned into a sickly sweet grin. "My dear." Yes, she could. "Would you mind taking a seat? I'll prepare some tea." Dad swiftly added, "We can catch up like a proper family." Family? I couldn't contain my laughter. When I was unable to pay their exorbitant rent, the same family evicted me from their home. This is the same family that claimed to have no daughter. Mom began, "Now, Riley, all we wanted to do was teach you responsibility." "Oh, I did learn to be responsible," I interrupted her. "I did a great job learning it. Actually, let's talk about your updated rental conditions." I doubled the amount they had been paying each month. Their faces lost their color. "That isn't feasible." Tommy blew up. "That's beyond our means. Where can we expect to find such a sum of money?" I shrugged, repeating what they had said years before. "It's not my issue. You have till the 1st of the next month to either move out or pay the increased charge." They trailed me to the entrance. Their voice veered quickly between threatening and begging. I resisted Mom's attempt to take my arm. "Please, Riley," she pleaded. "Are we members of your family?" "No," I answered firmly. "The day you put your comfort ahead of your daughter's future, you cease to be my family. You've got 30 days to make a decision." After a month, I watched from the other side of the street as Tommy and my parents packed their final possessions onto a moving truck. Over the last few weeks, they have made several attempts to contact me, alternating between pleading for more time and threatening to take legal action. I hadn't picked up any calls. Mom was the first to notice me. Dad looked up from the box he was carrying when she gave him a little shove. You could see the anger in their eyes. Tommy glared at me and slammed the back door of the truck with needless force. They didn't say anything to me. They just got into their cars and left the house they had rented for more than 20 years. I walked up to my property after waiting for them to leave. My land. I could still feel the strangeness of the words. I walked inside after unlocking the front door. Emptier yet still laden with memories, the home felt larger now. I extensively refurbished the house over the course of the following 3 months. An open-concept living area was created by tearing down the walls that had seen my tears. The kitchen, where I had spent many hours preparing meals for an unappreciative family, had been completely renovated. Tommy's valuable gaming space, with built-in bookcases and lots of windows, my former bedroom was converted into a home office. Every alteration was like wiping out another unpleasant memory. The markings where I had previously measured my height alone since no one else wanted to do it, were removed when the contractor removed the old wallpaper. A new hardwood floor replaced the groaning floorboard that had always betrayed my late-night study sessions, and elegant tiles took the place of the discolored carpet that had endured years of spills that I had to clean up. When I presented her Uncle Mark and Emma the grand tour, Aunt Sarah remarked, "It looks fantastic." The home no longer even seems to be the same. I led them to the new back deck and said, "That's the point." My favorite home improvement. My real family and I sat there sipping lemonade while taking in the sunset over the backyard where a swing set used to be. A garden was now beginning to grow, with mill life emerging from the ancient soil. After that day, Tommy and my parents moved out, and I never saw them again. I occasionally heard vague rumors about them from others in the neighborhood. They relocated to a little flat on the other side of town. When Tommy realized that flat life wasn't for him, he ultimately moved out on his own. But I no longer cared about their lives. Here, in this refurbished home free of ghosts, was my life. I had at last discovered what I had been searching for all along, with Sunday meals with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark's, movie evenings with Emma, and holiday festivities full of sincere love and joy. The basic fact that family isn't about blood or duty, not retaliation nor achievement. It all comes down to love, support, and deciding to always be there for one another,